Have you ever wondered what would happen if millions of undocumented immigrants were suddenly deported from the United States? Could it really happen? What would it mean for families, communities, and the countries they are sent back to? As President-elect Donald Trump's campaign promises to deport illegal immigrants, we must ask, will these promises actually materialize? How would it work? When would it happen? And what challenges might he face in making it a reality? Let's dive into this critical issue and uncover the potential path forward. For years, Donald Trump has been vocal about his stance on illegal immigration. His 2016 campaign focused heavily on building a border wall, tightening security, and implementing harsher policies. Now, as president-elect with his party controlling both Congress and the Senate, one of his most significant proposals is mass deportation. If he follows through with this plan, his administration would push for the removal of undocumented immigrants from the U.S. But how feasible is this? When could it happen? And what legal, social, and logistical challenges could stand in the way? How Trump plans to carry out mass deportation. Trump's plan for mass deportation would involve a radical overhaul of U.S. immigration enforcement. The goal would be to remove as many undocumented immigrants as possible, particularly those with criminal records or who have overstayed their visas. This would mean strengthening the existing agencies that handle immigration enforcement, such as U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, and Border Patrol. Trump has suggested expanding ICE's budget and authority to enable mass raids and detentions. One of the most controversial aspects of Trump's plan is the possibility of deploying military personnel to assist in the deportation process. Trump has proposed using the National Guard and other military resources in past years. However, this could face pushback due to the Posse Comitatus Act, which limits military involvement in domestic law enforcement. This legal hurdle could slow down the progress of implementing his plan. Trump's mass deportation approach would likely begin with individuals who have committed crimes or those who have overstayed their visas. The U.S. government would focus on high-priority cases to remove individuals who pose a public safety threat. Critics argue that this focus would still leave many undocumented individuals at risk of being deported under the broad scope of mass deportation. When could mass deportation happen? As president-elect with a Republican-controlled Congress and Senate, Trump would likely have the political support necessary to begin implementing mass deportations soon after taking office. However, the process would still take time to fully implement. The first few months would likely be spent increasing border enforcement, expanding detention facilities, and preparing legal actions. Trump would likely prioritize deporting individuals with criminal convictions, as this would be seen as a straightforward way to garner public support and avoid accusations of targeting vulnerable populations. The timeline for mass deportation would also depend on funding and cooperation from local authorities. While federal law enforcement agencies have the authority to carry out deportations, Trump would need support from states and local governments to effectively implement his plan. Some states have more cooperative policies, while others are more resistant to federal immigration efforts. Economic impact of mass deportation. And beyond the legal and logistical challenges, one of the most concerns surrounding mass deportation is the potential economic impact. Many of the individuals who would be targeted for deportation are working in key sectors like agriculture, construction, and healthcare. These industries depend heavily on immigrant labor, often at lower wages for jobs that U.S. citizens are unwilling to fill. If millions of workers were removed, it could disrupt the entire service delivery in these sectors. The lack of available workers for essential, albeit undervalued or underappreciated jobs, could lead to inflationary pressures on the U.S. economy. As wages rise to attract U.S. workers, the cost of goods and services would likely increase. This could have far-reaching effects, including higher food prices, delayed construction projects, and even labor shortages in hospitals and elder care facilities. Trump's election promises might sound appealing to his supporters, but delivering on such a grand scale would be a whole new challenge. The reality of mass deportation could lead to unintended economic consequences that the U.S. public may not have fully anticipated. For all the anti-immigrant sentiment, many Americans may find themselves facing a new reality where everyday services are impacted and prices rise in the wake of such policies. Legal challenges ahead. One of the biggest hurdles to mass deportation is the legal landscape. Trump's plan would face significant opposition from various groups, including immigrant rights organizations and sanctuary cities. Sanctuary cities are localities that limit cooperation with federal immigration enforcement, and they could stand in the way of deportations by refusing to detain individuals or hand them over to ICE. Additionally, certain protections currently exist for immigrants who have been living in the U.S. for years. Programs like DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, protect young immigrants who were brought to the U.S. as children from deportation. Even if Trump sought to end these protections, it would take significant time and legal battles to dismantle such programs. International law would also complicate matters. Asylum seekers, for example, have certain rights under international conventions. Many undocumented immigrants come from countries where they fear violence or persecution, and sending them back to such environments could raise human rights concerns. This could lead to lengthy court cases and international backlash, making mass deportation an even more challenging undertaking. Where would deportees be sent? A key question in Trump's plan for mass deportation is where will the illegal immigrants be sent? Many of the people targeted by mass deportation policies have spent years, if not decades, living in the U.S. They have families, jobs, and homes. Returning them to their countries of origin would not always be straightforward. Some countries might not have the resources to handle large numbers of deported individuals, leading to potential diplomatic and humanitarian issues. Mexico is often cited as a key destination for deported individuals, as many of the undocumented immigrants in the U.S. come from Mexico. However, while Mexico has agreed to accept deported individuals who have been apprehended near the border, it is not legally obligated to take back all deportees. Mexico would need to cooperate with the U.S. government, and large-scale deportation efforts could strain this relationship. Moreover, the situation in other countries might not be much better. Many deportees come from war-torn regions or politically unstable countries. Sending individuals back to these areas could put their lives at risk, and the U.S. would face significant backlash from the international community for returning people to unsafe conditions. Logistical challenges. The logistics of deporting millions of people would be an enormous undertaking. The U.S. government would need to coordinate efforts between various federal agencies, local law enforcement, and immigration authorities. ICE would need more resources, including additional personnel, detention centers, and transportation. Additionally, the detention of large numbers of immigrants would raise concerns about overcrowding and human rights abuses in detention facilities. The cooperation of local governments and states would also be necessary to carry out mass deportations. States with sanctuary policies, such as California, may resist federal efforts to round up undocumented individuals. Legal challenges from advocacy groups would further complicate matters, potentially delaying deportations or making them more difficult to execute. Mass deportation may seem like a simple solution to the problem of undocumented immigration, but it is far more complicated to implement. Legal challenges, logistical hurdles, international negotiations, and the social and economic impact on families, communities, and industries would make it a controversial and difficult process. If Trump wins the 2024 election and pushes forward with his mass deportation plan, the U.S. will face a major shift in its immigration policy. Don't forget to like, comment, and share if you found this helpful. Subscribe to our channel for more insightful content.